Looks like there are still some people that are just jumping on now, but I will get started. Shavua Tov, everyone. My name is Etan Ehrenfeld. I am an alumni of Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh. I was actually the first year. My Shana Aleph was the first year of Yeshiva Netiv Aryeh, so that's 2003, 2004. So it's great to be on with all of you. I'm sure your years have been significantly impacted by coronavirus, by everything that's going on, and so it's really impressive that you guys are still largely committed to learning and coming to shiurim virtually. So yeshikoach to all of you. I felt very privileged when Rav Korn called me last week, asked if I would give a shiur. So I'm happy to share some thoughts tonight. I actually am someone who I was diagnosed with coronavirus about 2.5 weeks ago. I'm basically over it. I still have a little bit of a cough, probably unrelated to coronavirus, but thank God I'm doing okay. My family's doing okay. As well as anyone else could be doing in these very, very difficult times. But I did have a few thoughts going through this experience that can, we can take us into the upcoming Yontif of Pesach. The truth is, I was actually diagnosed with coronavirus on Purim, and I'd gone tested before, so I knew I didn't go to shul or anything. And as I was sitting in my house on Purim, thinking how, this is probably the most depressing Purim ever, I remembered seeing something years before, and perhaps it's something you guys had come across in the years leading up. Sorry, I'm just going to mute everyone. There we go. He's talking. Okay. All right. It's better. So, so I remember seeing years before that there's a commentary on Megillas Esther by the Ramah of Moshe Isserlis. And we know the Ramah from Shulchan Aruch, obviously. And the Ramah, in his commentary, has a little introduction. And his commentary is not very popular. It's a little hard to understand. It's very esoteric. But in the introduction, he writes what motivated him to write this commentary. And he says that in a particular year, there was a terrible plague. The way he describes it was that the air in his town became unbreathable. Something happened in his town in Krakow where the Ramah no one could stay in the town. So everyone had to leave the town, and he traveled to a town far away, and he, how you doing, Chaim? He traveled to a town far away, and he was living in someone's basement. He didn't have any money, he couldn't afford any food, Mamish couldn't afford anything. It was somewhat depressing. And he says as he sat there, he wasn't able to have a Seudah for Purim, he wasn't able to do anything. He decided, he took a pen and paper, and he said he's going to write a parish on Megillas Esther. And he's going to write it and send it to his father. And that's going to be his Mishloach Manos for that year, because he had nothing else. He had no Seudah, he had no food, nothing he could give. And as I sat in my house on Purim thinking about that, I said it feels similar here. The largest outbreak happened really after Purim, but as we're going into Pesach, where the Ramah had to show tremendous creativity that year to think about how is he going to do something substantial and celebrate his Yontif in a substantial, serious kind of way. And I think that's the situation that we all find ourselves in. We're looking at Pesach and we're thinking, how can we make this Pesach meaningful? There's so many, there's just so many things, whether we typically go away for Pesach, whether we're with family, whether we're in a hotel, whether we're doing, we're just with a lot of people. And this year we're all facing a different kind of Pesach. And so the question that the Ramah was dealing with is, I think, a question that we're all dealing with right now. The other thing that I feel like we're going through is the Makkah of Choshech. A lot of people talked about the plagues. We're in a plague. Mitzrayim was in plagues. But there's a particular Makkah that I feel connected to, and that is the Makkah of Choshech. I think that's the most similar Makkah to what it is we're going through. How you doing, Matthew? Because the Chidushei Harim, when he talks about the Makkah of Choshech, Chidushei Harim was the first Ger Rebbe. The Sfas Emes was a more popular Ger Rebbe, but his grandfather was the Chidushei Harim. The Sfas Emes, his parents died when he was very young, so he was really raised by his grandfather. And so his grandfather, the Chidushei Harim, when he talks about the Makkah of Choshech, he says the Makkah wasn't that it was dark. The Makkah was that they couldn't go anywhere. And he writes, he says, L'ro ish esachiv, what was the problem? Lo hoyu makabel hashpah zeh mizeh. People weren't able to come together. When we come together, when we're social with each other, we're able to interact. We're able to raise each other up. And he says, the Mitzrayim didn't have that for the 6 days of Makkah Choshech. And he can contrast that with the Jewish people. The Jewish people, they had light. They were still able to come together. They were able to lift each other up, raise each other up. He talks about removing the Sitra Achra. But the Makkah of Choshech was really a Makkah of isolation. And as we're going into Pesach, that's the Makkah that I think we can most relate to, the Makkah of Choshech. We're all isolated. We're all practicing social distancing. We're all, whether maybe we're with our family, we have a few people to talk to. Baruch Hashem, we have Zoom. Baruch Hashem, we have cell phones, so we don't have to feel totally isolated, but there's a major level of isolation that we're all experiencing. And that has ramifications. It has ramifications emotionally, it has ramifications spiritually, it has ramifications psychologically, and it's something that we all are feeling, and it's something we all have to think about as we head into this Yontif. So how do you combat the Makkah of Choshech? That's the question. How do we combat the Makkah of Choshech? And so I have two suggestions that I'm going to share with you tonight, and feel free to take them, feel free to leave them right here on Zoom. The first comes from a story that we all know well from the Haggadah. The Haggadah is actually the only place we have this story recorded. Ma'aseh Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Tarfon, Shahayu Mesubim ben Bnei Brak. Right, we know there were 5 great Tanoim that had a Pesach Seder in Bnei Brak, and they learned all night. They were discussing Yetzias Mitzrayim all night, and they lost track of time, and the Talmidim had to come and knock on the door to tell them, Higi Zman Kriyas Shema Shel Shachris. The question is, why were these rabbis in Bnei Brak? Why were they in Bnei Brak? We know Bnei Brak was the town of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was the Rav, he was the Morid Asra in Bnei Brak. But why'd they go there? Because we know that Rabbi Akiva wasn't the Nasi. The Nasi was probably, at this time, we don't know exactly, it was probably Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Perhaps many of you have learned the famous story in the 4th parak of Brachos, where Rabbi Gamliel was the Nasi, and him and Rabbi Yeshua had some debates, and Rabbi Gamliel was very harsh with the way he handled it with Rabbi Yeshua, and ultimately Rabbi Gamliel was deposed. He was removed from office, and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was in his place. In fact, some point out that's why Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's name is in the middle, because the most chashuv person would sit in the middle. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, even though he was the youngest, right, we know Kiven Shivim Shana, he was only 18, but he was like he was 70. So even though he was Kiben Shivim Shana, nonetheless, he was in the middle. He was the youngest, but he was in the middle. So perhaps he was the Nasi at the time. So why don't they go to him? Why did they come to Rabbi Akiva? So there's a beautiful Haggadah written by the Aruch HaShulchan. The Aruch HaShulchan is more famous for his sefer, the Aruch HaShulchan. But there's a Haggadah called Leil Shimurim. And in Leil Shimurim, he references another important story that perhaps many of you have heard from the end of Maseches Makos. The Gemara at the end of Maseches Makos tells the story of a group of Tanaim, many of them, the Tanaim from this story. They were walking through Yerushalayim after the destruction of Beis HaMikdash, right? Beis HaMikdash was probably destroyed about 50, 60 years before. And they walk past the Beis HaMikdash, where the Beis HaMikdash once stood. They walk past Har Bayis, and they see a fox run through where the Kodesh HaKadoshim once stood. And all the Tanoim start crying, except Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva starts laughing. And the Tanoim say, Rabbi Akiva, how could you laugh at this time? And the Tanoim look at him and say, Rabbi Akiva looks at him and says, how could you cry? They say, this is the place, the Makam HaMikdash, the Kodesh Kadoshim, only the Kohen Gadol once a year could go there. And now a fox is just running through. And Rabbi Akiva looks at him and he says, that's exactly why I'm laughing. He says, because until now, I wasn't sure if the nevuah of the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash would come true. But now that I saw that these nevuah, the nevuah of the destruction, the nevuah of animals roaming on Har HaBayis has come true, now I know that the nevuah of the rebuilding of the Beis HaMikdash is going to come true. And the Tanoim look at him and they say, Akiva nechamtanu, Akiva nechamtanu. Rabbi Akiva, you've consoled us. On no holiday is the absence of the Beis HaMikdash felt more than on Pesach. We should all be getting ready to go to Yerushalayim and bring a Korban Pesach with the rest of Klal Yisrael. Our Pesach Seder is a shell of what it once was, because we don't have the Korban Pesach. Yeah, we have a Haggadah, and we have Matzah, and we have Maror, and we do Korech, but everything it's still a mitzvah to eat Matzah, don't get me wrong, but we're missing, the Ikar is Chaser. The main thing is missing. What's the main thing? The main thing is the Korban Pesach. And so we're missing the Korban Pesach. How could it be? How do we go through a holiday knowing what should be? And so there's no better person, no one you want to spend that Yontif with better than Rabbi Akiva. And so that's why in the story in the Haggadah, the rabbis decide we're going to go to Rabbi Akiva, because he's the one who has the ability to be menachem, to comfort us, to console us. And so the first way we fight the makkah of choshech that we're feeling right now, the makkah of isolation, is we recommit our emunah. We strengthen our emunah, and we know that the Pesach, whether we celebrate the Pesach with 2 people or 200 people most years, we know that that Pesach is still lacking. It's still missing. You know what it's missing? It's missing the rebuilt Beis HaMikdash. It's missing the Korban Pesach. And may it be the Ratzon Hashem that even this year, we still have a few weeks. Even this year, Yeshua's Hashem Keherafayin, Hashem, the Yeshua from Hashem could come in a turnaround. And may it be not just a turnaround that we're released from the makkah of isolation, the makkah of choshech, but may it could be the Ratzon Hashem that we'll all be together in Yerushalayim bring a Korban Pesach this year. And if that's not the Ratzon Hashem and we're not zocha to it, and we're sitting alone at our Seder table, we still need to keep that emunah. Remember, Akiva nechamtanu, that we know there are nevuos. We know that this Pesach, this is only a temporary thing. And Amir Hashem soon will all be past it. We'll all be beyond it. We'll all be fulfilling Pesach, not just at this hotel, at that hotel in Miami, in Spain, in Arizona, wherever we usually go, but in the real destination in Yerushalayim, bringing the Korban Pesach. So that's one way. Strengthening our emunah like Rabbi Akiva did for the other Tanoim. But there's something deeper. There's another way that we can fight the makkah of choshech, the makkah of isolation. The Vilna Gaon, in his Haggadah, says something interesting. Aman ishtana halayla hazeh. He says, it's not really 4 questions. It's really one question, Man ishtana halayla hazeh, and 4 examples. What is the question? The question is as follows. Man ishtana halayla hazeh. This night is very different than every other night. You know why? Because every other mitzvah in the Torah, basically, is a mitzvah that we do during the day. And tonight, we have a ton of mitzvahs. Usually, every other mitzvah is a daytime mitzvah. And the Mefarshim on this Haggadah and other Haggadahs say, well, what about this one? What about that one? Okay, you could talk about this one and that one. But you never have a situation that you have a night that has so many mitzvahs. And then the rest of the Manishtana lists the mitzvahs. We have matzah, we have maror, we have dalid kosos. Well, that's not one of the kashas, but we have dalid kosos, right? We have heseba. I mean, it's a night that's filled with korban pesach, which was one of the original questions in the Mishnah. So how we have sipur yitzias mitzrayim. I mean, it's a night that's filled with mitzvahs, when normally we don't have mitzvahs at night. That's the question of the Vilna Gaon. And that question could be buttressed, be further, by another interesting question. See, Rashi in Parshas Bo comments that Bnei Yisrael didn't have enough merit, enough zechuyos to get released from Mitzrayim, to be redeemed from Mitzrayim. So what happened? HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them extra mitzvos, 2 mitzvos to do with dam, to do with blood, in order to be zochet, to be redeemed. What were those 2 mitzvos? Rashi says, "V'nosan lahem shtei mitzvos dam Pesach v'dam Mila shemalu ba'oso halayla." The mitzvah of dam Pesach, to put the blood of the korban Pesach on the doorpost, and the mitzvah of bris Mila, which they did that night. That night? How could they do bris Mila at night? We paskin bris Mila is bayom. It's a machlokas in the Gemara. We don't allow mitzvah Mila balayla. How could they do the bris Mila at night? Lastly, the pasuk says something very strange. Pasuk says that mitzvah sipur yitzias mitzrayim v'yigarata lebincha bayom hahu lemu. Why does it say bayom hahu? Isn't the mitzvah balayla hahu? Seems odd that it would say bayom hahu. So the Vilna Gaon's kasha, why so many mitzvahs at night? The question on Rashi, how could they do bris Mila at night? And the question on the pasuk, v'yigarata lebincha bayom hahu. Throw in one more question. The mitzvah of Hallel is exclusively reserved for daytime. How could it be that on Pesach we say Hallel at night? Many of us say Hallel at night twice, actually, once in Shul and then once at the Seder. How could it be that we're saying Hallel at night? Very, very difficult, very hard to understand. There's something very unique, obviously, about this night. Before we answer that, we'll go back to the original Makkah of Choshech, and then we'll come back and answer that kasha. And hopefully that'll give us one more eitzah, one more piece of advice in terms of how to deal with this coronavirus Pesach that seems to be upon us. We spoke about how the Chidushei Harim says that the Makkah of Choshech was a Makkah of isolation. The Yalkut Me'am Loes quotes a very interesting explanation of the Makkah of Choshech. It could go with the Chidushei Harim, but it doesn't have to. The Yalkut Me'am Loes says that the Makkah of Choshech wasn't darkness. It was actually an abundance of light. You ever have the experience when you're sitting in a dark room and then you walk outside in the middle of the day and you're like, you literally can't see for like a few seconds till your eyes adjust? The Yalkut Me'am Loes says that's exactly what the Makkah of Choshech was, but for 6 straight days. For 6 straight days, the Mitzrim had literally a blinding light that their eyes couldn't adjust to. There was so much light, and that's why they couldn't see. Very interesting parish. It literally turns the whole Makkah on its head. We always assume that if I would go back in time and I would go to Mitzrayim, circa the time of Yitzias Mitzrayim, I would say, and I saw the Makkah of Choshech, it would be pitch black everywhere, and then where the Jews were, there'd be light. And wherever they'd go, there'd be like a spotlight. That's, I think, how they show it in The Prince of Egypt. The Yalkut Me'am Loes says there was an abundance of light, a blinding light, and that's why they couldn't see. Their eyes couldn't adjust. The Jews, there was blinding light, but their eyes adjusted, and they were able to walk around. The Or HaChaim HaKadosh couldn't give a shir from the Tivarye without mentioning the Orach Chaim HaKadosh. The Orach Chaim HaKadosh says, you know what's so unique about the Pesach Seder? It says the Pesach, because Leil HaSeder, originally in Mitzrayim, and till today, has the status of a pasuk in Tehillim which says Laila Kayom Ya'ir. The night was lit up like the day. The night was lit up like the day. And so says the Orach Chaim, night, Leil HaSeder, has the status of Yom. It's like a Yom. And that answers all the kashas. That's why the Torah says, V'yigarat labincha bayom hahu. It's nighttime. Doesn't matter. It has the status of Yom. Laila Kayom Ya'ir. And Rashi says they gave bris milah at night. Yeah, that night they could give bris milah because it was like Yom. How do we say Hallel? How can we say Hallel at night? Because it's Yom. And the Vilna Gaon's kasha. Why is tonight unique? Why does tonight have so many mitzvahs? Because tonight is the one night a year that's like a Yom. It's a day. Tonight is a day. Okay. It's a beautiful explanation. Answers all the kashas. Laila Kayom Ya'ir. But what does that do for me? What does that do for us? How does that help my Pesach? The answer is simple. Ner mitzvah v'torah or, the pasuk tells us. Mitzvahs are like candles. Torah, learning Torah, that's like light. If I asked you, which night a year does the Shulchan Aruch say you should stay up all night learning Torah? Most people would say Shavuos. Go through the whole Shulchan Aruch. There's only one night a year that the Shulchan Aruch says you should stay up learning Torah. Leil HaSeder. It says, sit and learn until sleep overtakes you. Sit and learn. Sit and learn. Okay, so you fall asleep in your sefer, that's the time that you get up and go to bed. That's the night of learning all night. Torah is or. We find ourselves in a makkah of choshech, a makkah of isolation. We're not going to be able to go to shul. Again, I don't mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't create a Yeshua. Yeshua Hashem Keherafayin. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants it, we will be back in shul tomorrow morning for Shachris. That's the way the world works. But the way things are looking right now, the way we have to plan for, is that we're not going to be in shul. Not tomorrow, and probably not Pesach. We're not going to have a chance to have a chavrusa with our friend who we might be learning with. We're not going to have a chance to hear the rabbi's drasha or hear Kriyas HaTorah. Our Pesach's going to be different. But what the Orach Chaim HaKadosh says is Leil HaSeder is a day. And where does that light come from? That light to combat the choshech comes from learning Torah. It comes from the Torah we learn. And believe me, you have the whole array. The Torah could be Haggadah, it could be Gemara, you could be doing Chumash, Mavir Sedra, whatever Torah you're learning. Masha Libo Chafetz. But just know, every single time you open a sefer and learn Torah, there's some light that you're creating that's pushing away this makkah of choshech, this makkah of isolation. And that's the blinding light. Eventually, we want to get to a place where we've created so much light, like the Yalkut Me'am always says, that the makkah of choshech is not darkness and isolation, it's a blinding light that Klal Yisrael can walk out into because our eyes can adjust, because we're used to the awe of Torah. We're used to the awe of learning. So as we go into this Pesach, and as we hold on to this idea, the idea that our Torah is some of the light that pushes away the darkness, I'll share with you a story that Bibi Netanyahu likes to share. Many years ago, before he was prime minister, if you can imagine there was a time before he was prime minister, I know he's been there for so long, he was Israel's representative to the UN. And he came in, I believe it was the late 80s, maybe it was late 80s, early 90s. And he decided he's going to go to the UN. But before he goes to the UN, he's in New York. He wants to meet with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And he goes to meet with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Says, my name is Benjamin Netanyahu, representing the state of Israel in the United Nations. So the Rebbe looks at him and he says, the place you're going to is a place of great darkness there. But he says, but remember that sometimes the Baal Shem Tov tells us even a small light can push away a lot of darkness. And with that, he carried his message to the UN on that occasion and on many more occasions. That's our mission this Pesach. The world is covered in darkness. The world is covered in isolation and social distancing. It's a difficult time. It's a difficult time for Klal Yisrael. We're distanced. We're distanced from each other. We're distanced from our learning. We're distanced from our yeshiva. We're distanced from our shul. We're far away. We're far away from the places we want to be. The only way to push that darkness away, yes, it's to be mechazik or amuna like Rabbi Akiva did all those years ago for the Tanai, which is why they went to him. But we need to bring the light. We need to be Laila Kayom Yair. Within the darkness, we need to strengthen our learning, strengthen our Limud Torah. This isn't vacation. This is not a time to say, I'm on vacation. It's been azmanim. Let me cut my learning in half. This is the time to double down. This is the time to add an extra seder, pick up an extra sefer, give an extra shir, share a Dvar Torah with someone over the phone, write up a Dvar Torah and email it to someone. Now's the time to double down on Limud HaTorah, because if we do that, then Amir Hashem, we together will create that blinding light that will push away the darkness, not just for good, not just for this Pesach, but Liolam Vayed. So thank you all for coming. I wish you all a Shavua Tov. I wish everyone a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. It's been a tremendous privilege to share some words of Torah with you tonight. And I wish you all a Shavua Tov and a Chag Kosher V'Sameach. Have a great night.
Thank you. Shavua Tov.